What do you think the reason John Fetterman's shift from progressive outsider to pro-war establishment Democrat? John Fetterman was not sold to voters as a normal Washington politician. He was sold as the opposite. The hoodie, the shorts, the tattoos, the working class image, the promises on unions, healthcare, weed legalization, criminal justice reform, and forgotten Pennsylvania towns. He looked like someone who would fight the machine. But after he got to Washington, something changed. On Israel, Fetterman did not just support an ally, he became one of the loudest, unconditional pro-Israel Democrats in the Senate. While much of the Democratic base was horrified by civilian deaths in Gaza, Fetterman kept defending Israel with almost no boundaries. Then came the Iran war under Trump's second term. When the Senate moved to limit Trump's war powers and forced congressional approval for continued military operations against Iran, almost every Democrat supported the resolution. Even 4 Republicans joined them. But Fetterman voted no. He was the only Democrat to oppose advancing that war powers measure. So ask yourself, who voted for this version of John Fetterman? Did progressives vote for a senator who would protect Trump's war authority? Did anti-war voters vote for a Democrat who would side with Republicans on weapons to Israel? Did Muslim, Arab, young, working-class, and left-wing voters expect him to attack his own base while getting praise from conservatives? This is the problem. A politician's costume does not matter. The record matters. A hoodie does not make you anti-establishment. Tattoos do not make you progressive. Being blunt on TV does not mean you represent the people who elected you. Fetterman built his brand on empathy, but his foreign policy record looks like empathy stops at the border of Israel. And if a politician campaigns as one thing, then governs as something completely different, voters have a right to call it betrayal. Because representation is not an image. Representation is votes. Like, follow, and share, because we are not following the hoodie. We are following the record. Do you agree that John Fetterman still represents the voters who elected him? That is the real question. Because the old Fetterman brand was clear. Workers, unions, healthcare, legalization, criminal justice reform, forgotten towns, and regular people. But the new Fetterman record looks very different. Unconditional Israel support, opposition to blocking weapons sales, resistance to serious limits on aid, hostility toward the left, staff turnover, praise from conservatives, and a vote against advancing limits on Trump's Iran war powers. At some point, voters have to ask, is this independence, or did he switch political lanes after winning the seat, or is he compromised? Independence can be honorable, but he is compromised. His deception is no longer in his hand. That is the betrayal. A politician can evolve, but is it evolution? They owe him accountability, because representation is not a hoodie. It is not a slogan. It is not a personality. It is a vote. And Fetterman's votes are telling voters exactly where he stands. The question is whether Pennsylvania Democrats are still willing to stand with him. Like, follow, and share. Because we are not following campaign branding, we are following the votes. Do you agree with John Fetterman voting against limits on Trump's Iran war powers? This may be the clearest example of Fetterman's break from the voters who elected him. In May 2026, the Senate advanced a war powers resolution aimed at limiting Donald Trump's ability to continue military operations against Iran without congressional approval. This was not some symbolic protest. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war. The War Powers Resolution exists because presidents are not supposed to drag the country into endless conflict alone. And this vote was serious enough that 4 Republicans joined Democrats: Rand Paul, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Bill Cassidy. But one Democrat broke the other way: John Fetterman. He was the sole Democrat voting against advancing the resolution. Think about that. Fetterman ran as a working-class Democrat. But when the choice came between checking Trump's war power or giving Trump more room, Fetterman sided with Trump's war machine. That is not moderation. That is not courage. That is not progressive. That is a Democrat helping protect a Republican president's military authority during a war that many lawmakers said lacked proper congressional authorization. And the issue is bigger than Iran. If Trump can wage war without Congress, the next president can do it too. If Democrats say Trump is authoritarian but then refuse to restrain his war powers, what are they actually defending? Democracy or just party branding? Fetterman's defenders will say Iran is dangerous. Fine, Iran can be dangerous, but dangerous countries do not erase the Constitution. The question was not whether Iran is good or bad. The question was whether the president can continue military operations without Congress. And on that question, Fetterman did not stand with constitutional restraint. He stood with executive war power. That is why voters should be angry. Regular people pay for wars. Regular people bury soldiers. Regular people suffer when politicians chase foreign policy escalation while ignoring healthcare, wages, housing, and debt at home. Fetterman's vote was not just a foreign policy position, it was a confession. When forced to choose between accountability and war power, he chose war power. Like, follow, and share, because no president should get a blank check for war. Do you agree with John Fetterman's stance that U.S. support for Israel should come with no serious conditions? This is where Fetterman separated himself from much of the Democratic base. After October 7th, many Democrats supported Israel's security, but also began demanding limits: protect civilians, stop mass displacement, condition aid, and do not give Netanyahu a blank check. Fetterman went the other way. He became one of the most aggressive pro-Israel Democrats in the Senate. When Biden threatened to pause certain weapons if Israel launched a major ground assault on Rafah, Fetterman criticized the move. When asked about Netanyahu's conduct of the war, Fetterman said his support follows Israel. That sentence matters. Not international law, not Palestinian civilians, not conditions. Israel. Then look at the votes. In 2026, Bernie Sanders forced Senate votes to block certain arms sales to Israel, including military bulldozers and bombs. More Democrats were beginning to challenge the weapons pipeline. But Fetterman joined Republicans and a small group of Democrats to keep the sales moving. That is not a small disagreement. That is a line in the sand. When the base says ceasefire, Fetterman says Israel. When activists say condition aid, Fetterman says no. When voters say Palestinian children matter, Fetterman redirects to Hamas. And let's be clear, Hamas can be condemned without giving Israel unlimited weapons. Terrorism can be opposed without defending mass civilian death. Jewish safety can be protected without pretending Palestinian life is disposable. That is what many Democratic voters understand now. But Fetterman seems to have chosen the safest side in Washington: unconditional support for Israel. And in Washington, that is not courage. Courage would be telling Israel, yes, you have a right to safety, but not a right to starve, bomb, occupy, or displace people with American support and no consequences. Fetterman wants credit for being independent, but independence from your own voters while aligning with power is not independence. It is abandonment. Like, follow, and share, because no foreign government should get a blank check from American taxpayers. Do you agree with John Fetterman's Israel stance, even if people inside his own political world keep walking away? A senator's staff does not usually become the story. But with John Fetterman, the staff turnover became impossible to ignore. In May 2026, Fetterman's chief of staff, Cabell St. John, resigned. Reports described her as the third chief of staff to leave his office since he entered the Senate in 2023. That is a high level of turnover for a senator who has not even served one full term. And this did not happen in a vacuum. Fetterman's sharp pro-Israel turn had already created tension with progressives, former supporters, and even people close to his political operation. Reporting described frustration among staffers over his Israel position, and his communications director publicly said she disagreed with his less nuanced views on Israel. That should matter to voters, because when a politician changes direction this dramatically, the people closest to the operation often see it first. They see what issues get prioritized. They see which advisors gain influence. They see which voters are ignored. They see whether the office still represents the coalition that elected him. And Fetterman's coalition was not built by Netanyahu supporters and Republican warhawks. It was built by Pennsylvania Democrats, progressives, labor voters, young voters, anti-Trump voters, and people who believed he would be different. But now, many of those voters are watching him defend Israel with no serious limits, reject efforts to block arms sales, and side against Democrats on Trump's Iran war powers. That is why the staff resignations matter. They are not the whole story, but they are a warning sign. When voters feel betrayed, when activists feel ignored, when staffers keep leaving, and when conservatives suddenly praise a Democrat who once ran as a progressive, maybe the issue is not independence. Maybe the issue is political transformation. And maybe the question voters should ask is simple. Did Fetterman change because he became more honest, or did Washington change him?